Thank you, Marion. A lot of emotion shown there. The flood, of course, causes a wave of emotion for all of its victims.
And it can be especially hard on the little ones. The 2 News Team's Rocky Madden shows us how the kids are coping after weeks of living in a shelter.
They are the youngest of flood victims, and they share their feelings through their artwork.
When I was drawing the raindrops, I was doing real fast, like just beating on it, because I got to get some of that anger out.
They ruined our house, and it's over top of our house and so.
So what are you going to draw me a picture of?
Volunteer Red Cross counselors from the St. Louis Special School District are there for the little ones.
It gives them a chance to draw out how they're feeling without trying to express it verbally, because kids always have a hard time talking about feelings.
A Red Cross coloring book also helps children express emotions about the flood.
A coloring story about the awful rain and how it made me feel. It has been raining for a long time, and the sky is always gray. That made me mad. I wanted to play outside. The mud went onto the porch. Some even went into our house. Teddy floated down the street. I cried a lot. Teddy was scared. Other things were floating away. Mom and Dad are worried. I am too. The dog keeps whining. We don't know what will happen to us.
It makes everybody mad at each other and destroys everything.
I don't cry, but I feel like crying.
The kids tell their fears.
Our animals that we got there, maybe they forgot to feed them. Our next door neighbors are watching them, and they might forget to feed them, and our animals might die.
And they share their worries.
I'm afraid when I get home, all my stuff's going to be gone, because sometimes people might break into your house and take all your stuff.
Their feelings and pictures are sad, but counselors see rays of hope in the youngsters' art.
I see kids that are really in touch with reality. You know, they see the houses under the water. They know that it's going to be tough when they have to go back. All the kids have suns above the clouds and the rain, which to me signifies that the sun's still there. It's not that the hope is gone or that the sun is gone. It's just behind the clouds right now.
The kids' only hope now is for just a normal life.
I wish I was at home now.
Counselors tell us the youngsters and their parents will face another tough time when they return home and see firsthand how much the flood has destroyed. A break can devastate a town.
Yeah, but in many places, especially farm places, there's often high water, even when levees haven't been topped or toppled.
Tonight, Paul Shankman visits with a Columbia, Illinois family whose story is the story of many people trying to cope with the Great Flood.
On the Mississippi River at St. Louis this morning, stage 46.0 up to 10th.
Another morning has broken across the Illinois bottoms, but the levee has not. Lives and livelihoods are spared to face another day. But the hopes of the people who farm this fertile land are falling as fast as the river rises. If only worry was a cash crop.
At St. Charles, 35.1 up 0.8. 35.1.
About the time you think things are going to turn around and go right, why it rains more and you're back to square one again, you know.
Mike Lindhorst is the 4th generation of Lindhorst to grow up and grow crops on these bottomlands. Harold Lindhorst used to work these fields by hand, but today with so much water on the land, the only thing he can do with his hands is scratch his head.
See all the water out in here? We got, I guess, over 800 acres of ground we never even touched this year.
2/3 of the Lindhorst's 2,300 acres are covered with seep water. Only the fish cranes can find something edible on these soggy plains.
What do you figure you lost?
Oh, man. I'll tell you, I guess $1 million. It's all together, crops and all, you know.
If the Lindhorsts are anything, it is independent. They do it all by themselves. But this year, things are different. This year, they are very dependent on the levee that is shouldering back the Mississippi.
We spent $7 million down in the levee already. It'll be $11 million time they're done.
conversation about the levees has wedged out more reliable topics like grain prices and bursitis. And while the Lindhorst men seem confident the levee will hold, the lady of the house is terrified.
If it was up to me, I'd be moving out. At least get all your good stuff out and that you know it's safe.
Vernetta Lindhorst is the only Lindhorst who is packed just in case. In her case, canned vegetables. Ironically, fretting over food and flood, she's lost 10 pounds.
I don't have appetite, and it's getting better, but I kind of get over it. And then when you hear all the news and somebody else talking to you, and then you get to worrying about it again.
Those worries have even trickled down to little Doug Lindhorst.
It makes me sad that it's over the road and it's going to kill all the plants and all that. And it's just a disease ruins the ground.
The Lindhorsts have every piece of farm equipment imaginable, but they have no tool, no machinery capable of fixing this. A lifetime of work is at risk from what really isn't even a once-in-a-lifetime event. As evening falls, the county fair seems a good place to forget the bad that surrounds them. Tomorrow could bring ruin, but this day will end like it began, with the sun shimmering across fields that should be full instead of fallow.
You know, you've got to keep going some way or another, so if you let yourself get down too far, and then it might make matters worse.
You know what they always tell me? Where you lose it, that's where you find it. And that is so. If you lose your pocket knife, you're going to find it where you lost it. So you just go back the next year and raise another crop. See, you might find it all then, see?
Those are the great qualities of the heartland, aren't they?
They just do the best they can.
That's right.
Well, Paul tells us he talked with the Lindhorst this afternoon, and the man of the house says everything is still high and dry, but the lady of the house, well, she's moved all her canned goods upstairs just in case.
She's the one who's prudent. We'll be back with some final thoughts in just a minute. 1993, the home team has shown you many examples of heroism. The quiet heroism of the farm family we saw just a moment ago, the boisterous heroism of those volunteer sandbaggers, stoic heroism of the flood victims themselves. Now, how can we explain all the heroism we've shared? Well, Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa may have said it best. While he was in town for a convention, he watched volunteers along the River de Pere, and Tutu said simply, "It shows people are good." Now, as the high drama of the high water ends and the ugly, uncertain cleanup begins, we'll need all the heroism and goodness we can muster.
Especially in the weeks to come as the cleanup just begins. A long road ahead.
Long way to go.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Crisis on the Rivers.
And we thank you for joining us, and be sure to be back with us again in 1 hour for more expanded coverage of Floodwatch 93.
For all of us on the 2 News team, good night.
I'm Dick Ford. Expanded coverage from the home team continues after the live Powerball drawing at 9:59. We're going to take you to Prairie du Rocher, where a last chance battle is fought bag by bag. Plus, Chesterfield business owners finally return to their soaked companies.
They say safety has to come first. For the first time in Chesterfield, some residents get the chance to go back to their homes and businesses. But they had to take a boat to get there because most of this area remains underwater. And in Prairie du Rocher, it looks like hard work and ingenuity paid off. Despite water overtopping levees in some places, the historic town may have weathered the storm. Yesterday, the Army Corps of Engineers cut a huge section out of the Mississippi levee to divert floodwaters. And local officials went one step further. They used dynamite to blast 2 more holes in the levee. And so far, the plan seems to be working. And that's tonight's Night Wrap.
Coming up, doctors deliver a baby.
Kids who have been forced out of their homes. Some are confused. They have no clothes, no toys, and they can't understand why.
We got evacuated.
How come?
They're driving me nuts.
Carol Rubel is the mother of 4-year-old John and 2.5-year-old Ashley. They were forced to evacuate 3 days ago.
They told them to get out. They didn't tell them where to go or anything, so they slept in the car, and she had shorts on, and she got ate up by mosquitoes. I took her over to the Red Cross unit earlier, and they sprayed her down with some stuff, but she's got diarrhea and she's throwing up.
While nurses are helping those kids who are sick, counselors are working with kids who are now living at shelters. Therapists say many kids are devastated by the flooding and the evacuation, and they suffer with nightmares.
Parents in the shelters have expressed concerns about how their children seem to be regressing in their behavior. For instance, kids that have outgrown thumb sucking might revert to that. Maybe they've achieved toilet training would go back to it.
Therapists say it's best for the hundreds of families who are now living in shelters to explain as much as they can to their children, and this will help relieve some of the children's anxiety.
I am a school nurse and I've worked with children, and I think if you would tell them calmly what's going on and give them explanations, they react better.
But for many families, there is a great deal of uncertainty, and parents cannot always answer all the questions that children have. So in these situations, child therapists say it's best to let the child know that you are in control of the situation and that you will continue to take care of them. Those working with families now say it's important to remember that kids can't always put in words what they are feeling, but they will show you through their behavior. John Schiesser, St. Louis 11 News.
Bill must work out differences between the House and Senate versions of the emergency aid package. Then the compromise bill must clear both the Senate and House. And then finally, a presidential signature. Congress is scheduled to go on summer recess next week.
Who live and work in the floodplain can come to apply to tour their damaged property. And not far from here is the spot where Highway 40 dips into the Missouri River. That's the spot where the tour boats shove off.
Tonight, Highway 40 was a safe place to take a stroll and a good place to take a gander. But for business owners like Howard Price, the sightseeing is no fun. It's heart-wrenching.
We reached down and opened the front doors of the office, and the whole ceiling's hanging down. The water was up into the ceiling of the offices. And it looks to us that the water's probably 9 feet deep through our plant.
Howard Price Turf Equipment was founded 20 years ago, but now the company is in a crisis. Though Price bought the most flood insurance he could, $200,000 for the contents of his factory, he says he has at least $1 million worth of machinery and inventory inside those doors. His 80 employees are out of work.
Any idea how soon your people will be able to get back to work?
You know, I imagine it'll take us a couple weeks to clean it out once we can get back in the building.
And that may be a month or two.
We'll have to take all the electric motors out and have them dried, and big compressors we'll have to have all stripped and back before we can go back to operations.
Believe it or not, we are eastbound on Highway 40 right now, and traffic is appreciably lighter than it normally is this time of the day. But the view is awesome. It is said nearly 300 businesses are underwater.
Back at the Highway 40 dock, we found one resident sorting through the clothing he was able to grab from his house. He also lost a small landscaping business to the high water. His tour shocked him.
There's a lot of mess. There's a lot of destruction. A lot of the glass in the buildings is broke. There's a lot of fuel out on the water. There is a lot of debris. The dumpsters are everywhere. There's buildings that are pushed over. It's unbelievable.
And later, as Howard Price arrived back at the dock, there was one bit of consolation as he headed up the highway to his car. He noticed the floodwater streaming into Wild Horse Creek, which flows back to the channel where the Missouri is supposed to be.
Mr. Price has a cleanup plan. He's got a friend who owns an old St. Louis City fire truck, a pumper dating back to the 1940s. He plans to use that vehicle to clean all the muck out of his factory. Now, earlier today at Parkway West High School, there was a packed meeting to tell Chesterfield business owners how they can be helped, how they can get help through the Small Business Administration and FEMA. Later in the broadcast, we'll tell you all about that. Back to you.
All right, John Hall reporting live from Chesterfield. Last night at this time, we were telling you about a small Illinois town south of St. Louis in dire straits as the Mississippi River was poised to pounce on it.
Tonight, there is still hope. So far, the town of Prairie du Rocher is dry. It appears the river is going down even a little.
They issued guidelines for the restaurants that include not using machines that operate from the city's water system.
And for the sake of conserving water, urging owners to use bags of ice purchased outside the water district and using disposable plates, pre-prepared foods, and portable toilets. Midtown is following the spirit of the guidelines and not missing a beat. Now, those contingency plans did not come cheap. It cost Bob Metzger about $1,300 to get the necessary pumps and tanks to get this system in place. But it is paying off Rick and Karen with continued uninterrupted business.
Good for him and his customers as well, I'm sure.
Same place. I seen it come up like that.
Is this the worst you've ever seen it?
That's the worst I've ever seen it.
The levee break makes the situation here even worse.
It goes down here to Princess Jody Mobile Home Park, Missouri Mobile, and unincorporated St. Charles County.
What can you guys do to stop it, if anything?
Nothing. You know, the river has won here. I mean, it'd be way too dangerous to try and get anybody up there to plug that gap. It's just too wide, so the river has won here.
And across town, the Mississippi wins too. There, not much new water is pouring in. The water already there is bad enough. Flood victims don't know when they'll go home.
That's the hardest thing right now, you know, being out as long as we have, 3 weeks now, and, you know, a little 9-week-old, and, you know, he's been 3 weeks of that out of the house and moving around from hotel to hotel, trying to find a place that's big enough for the 5 of us, and, you know, it's been an experience, not something I want to duplicate.
Still, with reports that the river levels are falling, officials are cautiously optimistic that the worst is over. Flood victims say misery will begin once more when the water is gone and they see what Mother Nature has left behind.
The worst is yet to come, especially with the insurance and just the whole park. It's a mess. It's a disaster. No, I don't think it's done yet. I think the worst is yet to come.
Well, officials tell me they've seen the river level drop about a foot in the last day. Still, that's not low enough to keep the water from crashing on through that levee. Back to you.
Well, if authorities think the worst is past, do they have any idea when that water might stop coming through the levee break that we saw?
Well, Dick, they figure it might be several...
It has been off limits for days. Saks Electric President Larry Plunkett is one of the first to get in.
I'm going to assess the damage. I have a lot of equipment in there. I want to get some random pieces of small equipment to see how we can get them fixed or repaired, or if they must be totally replaced.
Among flooded-out executives, Larry Plunkett is considered fortunate. He got to see his business today. Most will not. That's because there are hundreds of owners who want in these waters, but only 10 boats.
We are making every effort we can to obtain more boats to increase that, but it has to be done in a safe, controlled manner, in a manner that will allow us to protect the property that is there from looters.
Police also contend the waters aren't safe because of swift currents, floating debris, and because it's impossible to avoid certain obstacles. Take a look at this street sign peeking out of the water. Others are completely submerged and harder to miss.
For the record, I'm standing about a foot of water here.
And a foot of water is what many of the business owners in the Chesterfield Valley have to look forward to when they finally do get to survey their damage. The fact that they've had to wait as long as they have has them very angry. The 2 News Team's Dennis Riggs attended a meeting this morning where the business owners showed city officials how frustrated they are.
More than 800 Chesterfield citizens, mostly business owners, come searching for help. It was supposed to be a calm meeting to explain what federal money is available and how to get it.
One of the purposes of this meeting was to answer questions. And as you might imagine, many of the questions got a bit heated.
Business owners are mad about seeing their companies only this way, on television. Mayor Jack Leonard has kept them out of the flood area, the decision he is attacked for.
I think you said one thing earlier that most of us would agree with. That's that you're ignorant of the facts of what's going on.
My being ignorant doesn't help. I know that.
No,
but
it doesn't. And if Chesterfield is the leadership of what we pay our taxes for to run your circus up there, then you need a wake-up call.
We had one of you business owners that rented a helicopter against to turn our back on somebody that flaunts the law.
But just to be on the safe side, the neighborhood was asked to evacuate. Most people who live along the floodplain don't have insurance. That's because it can cost as much as $700 a year.
We were kind of forced to go get some, but with all the other expenses, you know, we we can't really afford it.
Don Charles says his insurance is also expensive.
We thought it was when we bought it, but we look at it like now that if it really does spread, it'll probably pay itself off.
Apparently, many people have been having the same thought. Insurance agent Sherry Stemble has been writing a lot of policies.
I would say we've sold at least 5 times as many policies that we have in the past.
For about 100 homes in Cape Girardeau, it is too late to get insurance, and they've already been flooded. Policies do not kick in until 5 days after they've been written to protect against possible cheating.
And insurance adjusters will have to wait until the water recedes before they can assess the damage.
Missouri have recovered 120 caskets and vaults washed away from the city's 180-year-old cemetery last week. Some of the caskets floated as far as 25 miles downstream. A family assistance center has been set up to help families pinpoint the burial sites of their loved ones. Well, unlike many of the river towns affected by the floodwaters, the Chesterfield Valley is mostly occupied, as you have seen, by industrial and business firms, and that presents some problems unique to this area. Crowding into the high school cafeteria today, these are the faces behind the flood, the business owners and homeowners who are scrambling to get information about cleanup, rebuilding, just getting things back to normal. But it is not going to be a quick job, and it's not going to be a cheap job. Preliminary estimates say the waters won't go down for at least a month and a half, and the government agency that helps small businesses does not supply grant money, just limited low-cost.
We have to climb some steps over a...
Everybody was very tense.
Bob Hassenbuehler was one of the harbor pilots who's now being called a hero. Alerted by the Coast Guard, he couldn't believe what he saw from his perch.
It's probably about the nervous...
South County traffic. Tonight, officials say the bridge will have to be completely replaced when the floodwaters drop, and approaches to the bridge will have to be rebuilt also.
And a boil order for Washington, Missouri is lifted tonight. That in spite the heavy flooding still in that area. Tonight, Contact 2 helps a good Samaritan who had no one to help.
A Manchester apartment...
Its high water mark. Floodwater was 4 feet high in the home right here. The floors were all destroyed, the walls have buckled, belongings all ruined. Most residents will try to go back home tomorrow, tonight, but it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a whole lot of work to restore those homes and businesses.
And that's just a sampling of what we're going to see in this area once the water goes down.
So, did you feel like saying it today?
Saying what?
Remember last night? Ooh, it's so nice.
Oh, yeah, well, we can't say it like you do. So.
I guess not.
No.
I think a lot of people said it, at least I...
Area. It makes for spectacular pictures from Sky 2. But touring West Alton with the Missouri Water Patrol, you can now see the destruction the storm leaves in its wake. 70-mile-an-hour winds and 6-foot waves slammed into the town, ripping the metal off the ambulance garage and blowing out the walls of the fire department. Flying pieces of buildings smashed the windows of Immaculate Conception Church, leaving school hallways flooded and pews floating in the sanctuary. Buildings are blown down, some trees torn up, and others knocked over on top of buildings. Since the storm, some homeowners have gone in to find or try to find their homes.
I found nothing.
The house is gone?
As far as I can see, yeah.
What about the houses next to it?
It looked like 2 adults were gone, too.
A fellow had several hundred chickens and turkeys out there in a farm building. And when we got out there, the building was totally gone.
When you come into St. Charles Street, you're gonna, if you go straight over the fields, then she's on the end.
Other residents refuse to go back to look at their homes. They're afraid of what they'll find, so they're sending relatives in with video cameras.
We're hearing that the garage is either gone, walls are busted. We don't know, but she wants to see it, so we're here.
At the Salvation Army Relief Center, talk is on whether a town hit by a flood and a storm like this can ever come back.
I believe the farmers might come back. The rest of the people, I don't think they come back.
I think the town's pretty well dead.
I mean, it's so destitute. They can't afford it.
83-year-old George Applegate has lived in the area since 1925. He's ready to give up. His home is gone.
Completely demolished. The windstorm and the water combined.
Dennis Riggs, the 2 News team.
And that's not all. West Alton residents tell 2 News they're also having insurance troubles. They say their policies cover wind but not water damage. And they say that some insurance companies are insisting that the 6-foot waves and not the 70-mile-per-hour winds did all of that damage. Well, we're still wondering.
In the next several days, the water service will be restored. Officials stress tap water will still be dangerous to drink. Boiling will not make it safe. The tap water will be used for sanitary purposes only, but should not be used for bathing babies or anyone with sensitive skin. Now, the city of Columbia is getting some good news about its water supply tonight. The city is lifting its 11-day-old water conservation advisory. City workers fired up 4 well motors, gallons a day, and allows for the lifting of the conservation order.
The farmer wants his corn to look like in early August, but across the Midwest, thousands of acres of corn and other crops have vanished under the biggest flood in anybody's memory. Add to that a drought in the southeast and predictions of an early frost, and corn production could drop significantly.
In comparison to last year, it's down substantially. The problem that we have with this crop year is we don't know for sure what the damage is going to be.
Another uncertainty is transportation. With the upper Mississippi closed to barge traffic, some of last year's grain still hasn't gone to market.
There is grain that is still in bins that was supposed to have been moved, and harvest is getting near, so it could cause quite a problem from a standpoint of logistics, as well as possibly a price disruption.
But despite the devastation, food prices for consumers should remain relatively constant. So although the flooding may have little impact on what you and I spend at the supermarket in the near future, there's no telling what the final cost may be to either the farmers or the taxpayers.
It's really bad. Channels cut. There's going to be silt and sand left over everything, and so it's really hard at this point to measure what the real significance of it's going to be.
Farm groups like the Corn Growers Association warn if the government does not provide enough financial help, the huge losses in farming communities will make the entire region suffer.
In many of these levee areas, we don't know how soon they'll get back in. The water may not leave. I mean, it's going to be a long rebuilding period for these people.
Farm lobbyists are already at work to be sure the farmers get their share of federal disaster aid.
Betsy Bruce, 2 News Tonight.
Just yesterday.
Will come in handy. Portage de Sioux is under 6 feet of water. Most of the 190 homes, dozen businesses, and 2 schools will need major cleanup and repair. They held today's adoption meeting in a library, but the answers to the problems in Portage don't come from these books. They come from the businessmen and ordinary citizens who come here with open hearts.
In the meantime, right now, divers are looking for an apparent drowning victim. Police say 2 women saw a young boy jump off Highway 255 into water just south of Cahokia. No one has seen any trace of the boy since early this afternoon. Officials did find the boy's bike on the bridge. 7 divers have been searching in the murky water for at least an hour now.
Well, finally, there is some good news for some of the evacuees forced to leave their South St. Louis homes because of the threats of that propane explosion along South Broadway.
It was just announced more than 6,000 residents will be allowed to return home. News Channel 5's Ruth Ezell is live at the command post where the officials made the announcement just a little while ago, and good news for those folks, Ruth.
Certainly is, Deanne and Dan. As you will recall, it was 1 week ago today when officials started ordering the evacuation of residents around the area of the Phillips tank farm. And by Tuesday, 12,000 residents within a 1-mile radius have been forced to evacuate. But good news today, 6,600 of those residents will be allowed to go back home. And the reason is the operation by Phillips to stabilize the propane tanks, 5 critical propane tanks. As you know, 90,000 gallons of propane remain in those tanks. Phillips continues to inject water into the tanks to help stabilize them and to prevent any further leaks. There was, of course, over the weekend, a small explosion and a fire that had been brought under control, but it did provide some very tense moments. Now, although things are going pretty well now, authorities admit they're not out of the woods yet.
In a few minutes, News Channel 5's Sharon Stevens explains why.
Come here. Come on, stay down, Daddy's coming to get you.
It was the first time in days that John Duncan had seen his dogs, Brutus and Duke. The reunion brought a bright end to what had been a bad time.
First of all, I lost my wife. She moved out. Then Tuesday, I lost my job. Or I didn't lose it. They closed down. And then Monday, they moved us out of the house. So it's got to look up from here on. That's all there is to it. It's got to be better.
Thousands of South City and county residents were forced to pick up and move fast because of the propane threat from the nearby Phillips medicine.
Well, it's important the doctors give it to me. It's important for me to take. I'm 86 years old. I'm going to be 87 in October. So it's important for me to take at my age.
Sharon Stevens, News Channel.
Homeowners, farmers, businesses, and cities. The lawmakers adopted the measure quickly this morning so aid can be in flood areas before Congress goes on summer vacation. Now, since the measure makes minor changes to the earlier Senate package, the bill must get approval in the upper chamber now. If approved, as expected, it will go to President Clinton's desk today. She joins us live from the newsroom now with a look at how St. Charles is beginning to come back. Sarah?
Well, Dan and Deanne, like so many other cities, St. Charles has been affected by national exposure of the floods. Everyone thinking St. Louis and the surrounding areas are underwater. Tourists stroll along St. Charles Historic District, not seeming to really notice or care that the Missouri River at one time was just lapping up a block away. Now no businesses on the street were affected by the high water, but the perception put a big dent in tourism. When a person sees on television all of the water, we are right now down 60%, and I'm afraid it might even be worse than that in regards to the shops and restaurants in the historic district.
And tourism officials also say a big loss has been the fact that the city's 2 riverboats have been out of service. Officials tell me the losses this season can't be recouped, but as a morale booster, they still plan to hold their annual Festival of the Little Hills later this month. Dan and Dan?
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. In almost $8 billion a year, a lot of those dollars do come to the St. Louis area. Is the flood keeping vacationers away from here?
Joining us now is Bob Adell, president of the St. Louis Convention and Visitors Commission, and thank you very much for taking time out.
Thank you.
How big of a hit has the city taken regarding tourism this summer because of the flood?
Well, I think so far it's very difficult to tell. There has been some small cancellations of some meetings. There have been some group tours that have canceled.
Will be etched in our minds forever.
Officials closed Highway 40 in both directions at the Daniel Boone Bridge because of high water.
Right now, there is probably 5 to 6 feet of standing water on Highway 40, if you can imagine it. Many of you have driven this strip of road many times, and this is what you'd see this morning. No driving out here. In fact, there was a rescue earlier, a very dramatic rescue, of a gentleman who was walking through this chest-high, neck-high water.
This gentleman evidently was left at one of the local bars out here to run a sump pump overnight, and I guess the water got a little too high and he tried to walk out.
Pieces of our porch. We have a pool house, a 60-foot-long pool house that's turned sideways. It's incredible. You can't speak for the force. It came up vertical about 7 feet in about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
No smoking or open flames, because there is fuel in the water potentially, okay? He controls the situation. Once you get to the facility, you have 30 minutes to remain there, then you're to return. Anything that he does not want in the boat, he runs the show, okay? Anything you do bring back will be photographed by the police for our records, okay?
Okay, this is our reception center right here. That's one of the owner's office. My office is down the road there a little bit. Let's go down. I haven't been down there yet. This is your office? Yeah. Nice, huh? And here we got a visitor. Couldn't make a coffee table out of it. It's just a total disaster. It's all destroyed. There's nothing left there that is solvable.
Will you be able to come back?
We will come back, yeah. Will we come back in this area or not? That's undecided at this time, but we will come back. The business will go on.
So much uncertainty by so many people, and I know so many St. Louisans will never forget the sight of Highway 40 abruptly ending right near Chesterfield Parkway and a lake beginning where that road once was, because of the flood.
Joining us is Russ Signorino of the Missouri Division of Employment. Nice to see you again, Russ.
Thank you, Dan.
We talked about what kind of a hit tourism took because of the flood. What kind of hit did employment take? How many people affected by this?
Well, in the St. Louis area, since the flooding began, which was really the end of June, we figure about 10,000 jobs have been affected. Now, some of those people were only out of work for a short period of time. Some people were only out of work for a day or two until their employer found another location and reopened his or her jobs in the St. Louis area. You lose a weekly payroll of about $5.2 million. And if you figure in the benefits on top of that, that's about $7.3 million every week.
And there's a trickle-down effect, I would assume, if those people aren't making an income, they're not spending any
That's
money.
exactly right. We're all affected by it.
What's being done for the people out of work? What kind of benefits, aid is there?
Well, when somebody loses their job because of the flooding, they need to come to one of the employment offices on either side of the river and first try to apply for regular unemployment benefits. If you qualify for that, we go ahead and pay you. If you qualify for any other program that was established before the flood, we'll put you in those programs. If you don't fit in any of those categories, there's disaster unemployment assistance that's available to anybody, including self-employed business owners. They need to come to us with some proof of income or wages, hopefully 18 months worth of wages. And they need to get into the offices in the St. Louis area on the Missouri side by August. We'll have the money to pay the disaster unemployment assistance, which is a federally funded program. We're hoping to not charge the employers their account, the ones that are affected by the flooding, when their workers come in, because it is an insurance program, and the more you claim against it, the higher your tax rate is, so we're trying to eliminate that.
Are in Chopper 5, I believe, over Chesterfield. Is that right, Gene?
That's right, Dan. This is a wide shot of Chesterfield Valley. We're coming up on the one-week anniversary of the break of the Monarch Levee here, a rather dubious anniversary. But you can see that 1 week later, things are starting to settle down here. The water level is down considerably, Alan, wouldn't you say, since last Saturday morning?
Definitely. It looks to me like the water has come down. It looks to me like the water has come down at least 2 or 3 feet. Now, as you can see, Highway 40, Eddie, zoom in on that Highway 40 situation out there by the Daniel Boone Bridge. You can see how much the water has come down. As a matter of fact, you can see a lot more of Highway 40 now than you could yesterday morning.
And Chesterfield Airport is the same. A lot more of the buildings, and unfortunately, those waterlogged planes that were sitting out on the runway are more visible now. And it's still just amazing to see how long this water has hung around, and as long as the Corps says it's going to be here is also just a fact that's hard to comprehend. But you can see, even though Highway 40 is more visible, even though the buildings are more visible, it's got a long way to go before there's any more activity in Chesterfield Valley. Dan, in the end.
Gene, are you able to see any activity at boats or anything at all going on out there? We understand that more business owners are being allowed back in for a half hour at a time to retrieve whatever they can. And we understand the Coast Guard is patrolling out there, too. Is there any activity you're seeing?
Yes, there is. In fact, we've heard calls go out all day long for people with flat-bottom boats to please show up down here to help. They have a lot of business owners who are trying to get into those buildings and see what, if anything, is left of the few things they left behind. You know, many of them thought they would only have 3 or 4 feet of water. It ended up being 9 to 12. And there may still be, though, some things in the building they want to get out. So, yes, we see that. And the Coast Guard is constantly patrolling. Unfortunately, there are those who would try to get in who are not business owners and see what they could find, looters, to be exact. So, yes, there's a lot of both going on this afternoon.
Okay. All right. Gene and Alan, thank you very much.
And as we mentioned earlier, finally some good news for thousands in South for a different reason.
I'm doing it again. These are happy. These are happy. These are happy. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
You have made
You made
the Zimmer
my day.
family of Elmira very, very happy. I thank you all. So
I can't thank you guys enough for this.
It
This
is
is great. This is the best birthday I've ever had.
And happy birthday, Keith. There were so many presents today that Paulette Zimmer said Keith will share them with other youngsters throughout the tent city. They're going to need some cheering up, too.
Some big hearts for a little boy there.